FPL Game Week 5 transfer targets. In this video, as we do every single week, we're going to have a look at some of the best players you should be considering buying into your FPL teams going into the upcoming Game Week 5. We'll have a look across defenders, midfielders, forwards. We'll have a look at some of the key talking point players, maybe some players that you are considering buying that actually I don't think are the best players to be bringing into your FPL team this week. We'll also have a bit of a discussion on some of those highly owned players who are the most transferred out players in the game and whether you should be selling them as well. What is up everyone, FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim, and subscribe if you are new around here. And before we actually have a look at the top players to buy, just a bit of a reminder for you. Game week 6 is going to be a big week for a lot of you to be playing your wild card, and you might be thinking, well, if I'm wildcarding next week, I have to use my transfer this week. Now, maybe 90% of you watching this video will think, Harry, I know the new changes to the game, I know the new rules, but just as a little bit of a reminder, in case you fall into that 10%, you have the ability now, of course, to roll transfers through a wild card. So if in game week 6 you have 3 transfers and you decide to play your wild card, in game week 7 you will still have 3 transfers. That means the week before a wildcard, if you're wildcarding in game week 6, in game week 5, you don't have to go taking a 1-week punt. You don't have to be buying a player this week and using your transfer, because you can roll it through the wildcard and carry it through into game week 7, 8 until you do decide to go and play it. It does change the strategy a little bit, because we would be maybe talking about a few 1-week punts if you need them this week, but that's not quite as important even if you are going to wildcard in game week 6 or you're not going to. So now we're going to have a look at a few players that maybe you're considering selling going into game week 5 and whether you should hold on to them. First one is Diogo Jota of Liverpool. Now, the Liverpool versus AC Milan game in the Champions League has just finished. Diogo Jota did start. He came off about 70 minutes for Darwin Núñez. Now, the minutes that he got in game week 4 were a little bit concerning. Of course, he came just off before the 60th minute. But I'm not worried at all about Jota. He was the one in my team, and the more I watch Darwin Núñez playing for Liverpool, the more I'm confident that that is Diogo Jota's shirt. Now, of course, the minutes thing is a slight bit of a concern. Is he going to get subbed off early again? But once again, Darwin Núñez came on for him, and once again, he didn't perform. I'm pretty certain that Jota is going to start Bournemouth at home. If you want to maybe consider selling him going into Wolves away, Crystal Palace away, Chelsea at home, then maybe for players who play slightly more nailed minutes like Brian Mbeumo, like we're going to talk about, but this is not the week to sell Diogo Jota. We've got Alexander Isak, who is currently yellow flagged. Apparently he has an eye injury. We are expecting him back though going into game week 5. I would probably hold on to him. There are a few forwards that we would consider buying going into game week 5 or 6 that we will talk about in this video. And if you need money, I do think downgrading Alexander Isak to a 6 million around or 5.5 million forward that we will talk about again isn't a bad option. But if you don't need the money, he's not a sell. However, one forward that does feel like a sell this week is Muniz of Fulham. He looks like he's lost his place. He started in the Cup for Fulham on Tuesday evening. That does mean that I do think Raul Jimenez will be the one that starts again going into the weekend with Newcastle at home in game week 5. Now, the big thing comes is if you are wildcarding in game week 6, is it worth a transfer to sell Muniz of Fulham to someone else for a 1-week punt? If you have anyone decent on your bench, I don't think it's worth a transfer, and I would just bench Muniz and sell him on wildcard. But if you're not wildcarding or you have no one strong on your bench, I would hold on to him. And then we're going to talk about Eze. Now, Eze is, of course, one we liked for the early part of the season, has had a return in just 1 game week. He's not on penalties anymore. He got a goal and assist in the Cup last night. Of course, it was a fairly straightforward opponent, though, for Crystal Palace. But it does just highlight that he is still able to get returns even without penalties. And if you watched him in game week 4, those returns are still able to come as well. 6.9 is still a nice price for him. United at home, Everton away are still good fixtures for Eze. Eze, Isak and Jota are still holds for me, whereas Muniz is probably a sell. Next up, having a look at what to do with Arsenal. Now, of course, they have Manchester City away, but from game week 6 onwards, using the Fantasy Football Scout members area fixture ticker, they do have the best run of fixtures until about game week 20 because of how difficult the start to the season has been for them. Again, if you want to check that out, you can have a look with the link in the description. Having a look at what I'm going to recommend once we get to game week 6 is going to be double defense. I know there's the option to go and buy Bukayo Saka, buy Kai Havertz, but for me, double defense, set and forget for 20, 30 weeks of the season is absolutely the way I will go, and it will be the way that I recommend you going as well. There are other attackers in the league that can get close to matching Kai Havertz or matching Bukayo Saka. Well, to be honest, matching both of them. I was going to say it's easier to match Havertz, but they can match both of them. You could get a Palmer, you could get a Salah, you could get a Foden when he's back that could match Saka potentially as well. There aren't defenses in the league that are going to match Saliba, Gabriel, and David Raya for me this season. David Raya, if you can go to him on wildcard, is a great option, or you double up with both Saliba and Gabriel. In the fullback options, I'm not that much of a fan at Ben White at 6.5. I would just go for the centre-backs. And at left-back, I do think Calafiori and Timber will rotate a little bit once Calafiori is back. The double defence is absolutely the way I would look to go. They are getting bonus points. They are scoring goals. They are making saves. Yes, Saka has been involved a lot. Yes, Havertz, once he goes back up front, he can be back in the conversation. While he's playing centre mid, he's not even in it. But double defence and probably Saka is just the way to go, and just leave it for probably 20 weeks of the season. Now moving to have a look at Brentford. So again, all the data taken is from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. You can have a look, compare these players if you want. But Brentford go on a really nice run of fixtures, mainly from game week 6. But if you need to buy one this week, Tottenham away is definitely not a bad option. They do give up chances, particularly actually when they're at home. They're slightly all over the place defensively at times. Of course, Vita was the one I would be recommending alongside Bryan Mbeumo. But of course, he's picked up an injury, which sounds like he's going to be out for 2 months. Bryan Mbeumo is just the safest. He will still be a great option. He will still be on penalties. For me, he is going to be almost essential once game week 6 does come around. They have a fantastic run of fixtures. But it's outside of that what you could potentially go and buy. Now, in the Cup on Tuesday evening, Carvalho and Sade both started, both cheap midfielders. Carvalho got a goal and 2 assists. Sade picked up just 1 assist. However, that might look like Carvalho is the one to go and buy, but he's slightly less nailed. He played that game in Bryan Mbeumo's position, so we don't actually know guaranteed that he's going to play going forward. If they play a front 3, it may well be these 3 that line up, but it's not guaranteed because they have players like Damsgaard that can fill in and a few others as well. Kevin Sade definitely feels more nailed than Carvalho. If you're having to buy one this week, I would buy Kevin Sade because he's the safer pick. However, if you have the ability, like most people, to wait until game week 6 to buy a Brentford midfielder, then maybe you can have a look and see if Carvalho starts and if Sade starts. And if they both start, 4.8 million for Carvalho could be a fantastic buy. But right now, Bryan Mbeumo is number 1, by far the safest and by far the best. And if you want one of the others, they're an addition on top of him. Sade number 2 and Carvalho number 3. Next up is having a look at a cheap defence, and that is Nottingham Forest. They've been very good defensively. We spoke at the beginning of the season how last season they had very good underlying data. We said it this season, and they managed to keep Liverpool out. Now, Liverpool did have chances, but it did just show us they are going to be a strong defence, and all 4 of their defenders are potential picks. You have both fullbacks in Aina and Moreno who look pretty nailed, both coming in at 4.4 million. There is a slight chance that we do see other options like Neco Williams get minutes, but it does feel like this is going to be the first choice back for. Moreno was very attacking, as was Olaina at right back. There's not loads to pick between the two. I'd probably just about favour Olaina because he can play both at left back and at right back and has a slightly longer history in terms of minutes at Nottingham Forest. However, actually the one that I do really like is Milenkovic, the centre back. He has the highest expected goal involvement of 0.34 so far this season. He's actually predicted to score slightly more points because of that goal threat he offers from set pieces as well. Of course, if you only want to save that point bit of money by 0.1 and going with Olaina, that's absolutely fine. Now, the next fixtures are maybe not as fantastic. They've got Brighton away and Chelsea away. But other from there, they do have a decent run of long-term fixtures until about game week 10 to 12, which you can absolutely set and forget one of these as cheap options with a bit of attacking threat and defensive solidity that we've seen as well. Milenkovic number 1 and Aina number 2. Another cheap defender that you can look at as actually a bit of differential is Leif Davis of Ipswich. Of course, he was fantastic in the Championship, picking up 18 assists for them on set pieces, playing as left back and is getting so far forward. We've seen them be pretty impressive so far this season. They've already kept 1 clean sheet and he's got an attacking return as well. From 4 game weeks, 2 returns for a 4.5 Ipswich defender is great. And their fixtures from game week 5 onwards do look really, really strong as well. People are put off potentially because he plays for Ipswich, but the combination of the odd clean sheet with the attacking threat he has from open play and from set pieces is absolutely worth looking at. 1 assist, as I said, 0.14 expected goal involvement. He's right up there for the next 10 weeks for 4.5 million defenders for predicted points and who is expected to do really well. Again, performed well in the Championship. We weren't certain to see how he would adjust, but given the first 4 weeks, I think it's absolutely worthwhile having a look for him. I would probably just about favour going for a Nottingham Forest defender over him, but it's pretty close. Then moving up front, and probably the most asked thing for me to talk about in this video, is Dominic Calvert-Lewin versus Jamie Vardy, the cheap forwards. Who should we be going and buying? Both very low owned, both coming in at just under 6 million, both with very nice fixtures over the next 6, 7, 8 game weeks as well. Slightly better actual returns for Calvert-Lewin with 2 goals and 1 assist, whilst Jamie Vardy has come in with just 2 goals. So slightly better points per 90 for Calvert-Lewin. First thing to talk about is their expected minutes. While they're playing 1 game a week, which they do pretty much until December, pretty much they have the same expected minutes. They are both expected to almost complete 90. They're both expected to be on penalties for their team, and they both have good fixtures. Slightly better for Everton potentially because of that game week 6 fixture for Leicester playing against Arsenal, but outside of that, the fixtures are almost identical. Underlying data, both have 0.42 expected goal involvements per 90 minutes they're on the pitch, but we have a slightly better output for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Generally, if I'm picking one, I am just about going Calvert-Lewin. The Arsenal fixture does put me off because I expect an Arsenal clean sheet in there, whereas I do think Calvert-Lewin has the ability to score against Newcastle, which is his more difficult fixture. And we're expecting Everton to score slightly more goals. We've seen it so far this season as well. It's pretty close. I do think the ability to go Haaland and both of these is actually not a bad strategy, and it is something we will talk about in game week 6 wildcards next week as well. But I would just about favour Dominic Calvert-Lewin over going with Jamie Vardy. And then finally, a few more players to discuss. The first watch is Duran at Aston Villa. Of course, we saw Ollie Watkins go off in the Champions League last night and had ice around his ankle. However, Unai Emery has said it is just what he's managing. He knew he didn't want to play him for 90 minutes if he had the option, and he's absolutely fine. I know Duran has been scoring off the bench, but I don't expect him to be getting starts. I do expect this Ollie Watkins off for Duran sub to happen, and I just don't prefer him to either Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Jamie Vardy. Both of them are better options for me. So 6 million. If he was in at 5 million, then we'd be considering him as an impact sub or something like that. But right now, I would go with Calvert-Lewin or Jamie Vardy. Next up is Solanke. Now, Spurs have not been great going forward so far this season, apart from in a couple of games. And Solanke has not looked like he's found his feet quite yet. However, from game week 5, the fixtures do start to look pretty nice for them. Absolutely ones that we should be going and considering. 7.5 million does at the moment, just based off what we've seen so far, feel a little bit too much money to go and spend. Again, I would save the 0.5, save the million, or save the 1.5 million on the likes of Chris Wood, Jamie Vardy or Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who look like they're able to match Dominic Solanke based on having better fixtures than him over the short term. A cheap option in defence is Mazraoui. Now, he did go off with a slight knock, so just make sure he's fine for the weekend. You could also look at the likes of De Ligt, Diego Dalot. The upcoming few fixtures for Manchester United's defence are not fantastic, but from game week 8 onwards, they do actually go from a really nice run. They've just won 7-0 in the Cup last night as well. Okay, it was a slightly easy opponent, but I do think they're turning a slight corner. Garnacho also looked really good, a slight sort of deviation point there. I do like him as a potential option, but Mazraoui or De Ligt as potential cheap options is absolutely worth looking at. The only slight doubt in Mazraoui, and Manchester United fans in the comments, let me know. Now, with Luke Shaw, will he ever be back is the real question. But if Luke Shaw, Dalot and Mazraoui are all available, who are the first choice fullbacks? That's the only doubt about him in my mind, and maybe why you'd go with a Martinez, for example. And finally is McNeil, offering a slight different option to the likes of Kevin Schade or Carvalho as a cheap midfielder that we've already discussed. 5.4 million, top for chances and big chances created so far this season. And with Calvert-Lewin, he does go on a really nice run. He's also playing slightly more central this season in sort of a number 10 role compared to out on the left-hand side, where we're used to him playing, where he does get a little bit lost. And I do absolutely like that. If you don't want to go with double Brentford because you're going with Brian and Burma and you're not going with Calvert-Lewin, I really like McNeil, and he is definitely one to buy. Probably the biggest buy out of all 4 players that we've got here. So, top players to buy, a few players to avoid, a few players to maybe get in a few weeks. All the data, all the fixture tickers, all the players to buy is using the Fantasy Football Scout members area. Of course, check the link in the description if you want to sign up. They're still offering big discounts as well. Thank you so much for watching. Drop any questions you have about your team. What players are you considering buying, or are you just going to roll your transfer going into game week 6? Because I feel like that is going to be very popular this week. But even if you are, hopefully an interesting video. If you haven't already, my new podcast, Know the Score, has had a latest episode out on Monday as well. I'll leave the link above as well if you want to go and check that out. All the support over there is massively appreciated. It's a big, new, exciting project. So if you just want to try it, if you don't think it's for you, it's just Premier League chat, not really FPL, a little bit of FPL thrown in, but generally just Premier League. So go and check it out. If not, thank you for watching the FPL Harry channel, and thank you for all the support here as well. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.